It is Friday, August 8th. Let's talk PlayStation. Welcome back, everyone, to another Mafia episode of LTPS. As always, let's begin with our PS Plus reminder. The August games for the PS Plus Essential lineup is now live on PSN, so you can claim those games. And going into our first news story, we have some not-so-good news for the PlayStation Store on PS3, which is it's been undergoing maintenance for about 2 days. And that was unprompted, out of nowhere. There was no notice for that, and I actually checked about 3 hours ago. It is still down, so you launch the store, you're in there for maybe 10-20 seconds, and then you get the prompt, it kicks you out. So that is a little alarming. We know that Sony did try to close the store back in 2021, but obviously they gave notice back then with the PlayStation blog post letting people know, hey, we want to do this, here's the date when it's shutting down. This is out of nowhere, and they would do their due diligence on giving a proper notice when they want to sunset the store, or if they try to sunset the store again. I would think this is just some sort of back-end thing that broke, and it's obviously undergoing maintenance in a manner where they're not transitioning to new systems or something, but with what is a legacy behind-the-scenes platform, maintaining it probably isn't a high priority, so it's just something where something broke. Maybe they're looking to assign 1 or 2 people to investigate it and try and get it back up. I would think that's what's going on, so I wouldn't sweat it too much, but let's just hope the store gets back up and operational sooner rather than later. Alright, moving on to some PlayStation Studio news, beginning with Marvel Tokon Fighting Souls, where this game is getting a closed beta on PS5 very soon. It runs from September 5th to the 7th, and if you want to get involved in the beta, then you can sign up on PlayStation.com. It's through their standard beta process, so the regular program, there's nothing separate as far as the links you have to go through, I'm pretty sure. So if you already did register for this prior, then you should already be eligible, but I would imagine they're going to let a lot more people in versus how many people got to play at EVO, so that's going on, which the beta is going to feature online lobby matches, limited offline matches, rollback netcode, and spectator mode as well. So they'll be fielding a lot of opinions based on this game, which it sounds like they want to support it for a very long time, because also during EVO, speaking on stage, the producer Takashi Yamanaka said they want to, or they're planning to make this game the best experience ever for the next 10 years, which is a very big, deep commitment. Although this game could easily go 10 years if it is successful. That's the other thing that's always worth mentioning about, live service games. I mean, I think we brought this up with like the whole Concord fiasco, for example. Even something like before the game comes out, based on pre-orders alone, the roadmap for that particular live service game might already lose some funding, or they might cut the seasons down. You would think with this game they feel very confident to make that kind of statement. So the game could, in theory, not go 10 years, but if we think the game is going to do gangbusters, then yeah, it sounds like the commitment is there to properly support the game for a 10-year lifespan. In other live service adjacent news, we also found out some very important context on the Helldivers 2 Xbox port, which was PlayStation being the driving force behind that decision. So over in the Helldivers community Discord, we had the Arrowhead CEO, Shams Jorjani, respond to fans that were praising the company for making the Xbox port possible, and they said, and I quote here, "It was all PlayStation. Send them your thanks. We were all in support, of course." He elaborated further by saying that it's one of the coolest things they've ever done, or he thinks it's one of the coolest things they've ever done, which that might not be all too surprising given that PlayStation is publishing the game on Xbox themselves. PlayStation Publishing LLC, I think, is the exact name, but that usually is going to telegraph exactly the kind of commitment Sony has to getting the game on Xbox versus other scenarios where they'll find a 505 Games or something, or license it out, and kind of take their hands away from the whole situation. But they do seem very motivated to get some more revenue out of this game, and that will be very relevant to our later news story about Sony's fiscal report, because, well, you'll see there that live service is going to be a big part of the company's future roadmap. Moving on to Media Molecule, where the last remaining co-founder at the studio is now leaving. So, as a reminder, Media Molecule was formed in 2006 by 4 people, David Smith, Alex Evans, Mark Healy, and Karima Tooney. And so David Smith was the last one there, and he is now leaving. They announced this on their social media accounts in order to pursue personal creative projects. They said, and I quote here, 20 years ago, I founded Media Molecule with some wonderful people. It feels like only yesterday that I was noodling away on the prototype that grew into Little Big Planet. Today, I'm announcing that I am leaving Media Molecule to focus on personal creative projects. more recently, I've been feeling a growing itch to explore truly wild ideas and make things based on my personal whimsy, though I still greatly enjoy the creative dynamic of working at Media Molecule. There simply aren't enough hours in the day to work at Media Molecule and on my personal projects without entirely giving up on pursuing that mythical creature called work-life balance. So I've made the difficult decision to step away from Media Molecule. So first off, good luck to David. I mean, I think what he's saying is probably true in that he wants to pursue other creative projects. The thing is, whenever we have big departures at studios, if it's something where they've been around for a very long time, you can always read into it as, oh, that's something bad going on, but also it could very easily be they've done enough time at that company and they do genuinely want to move on and try something else. And I think for a lot of us going into our later years in life, you can sort of relate to that whole idea of trying to balance the work-life thing. So it's probably an issue. So good luck to him. I will say with Media Molecule, it's going to be very interesting to see where the studio goes from here now that every co-founder has left the studio and they're walking away from dreams. And so you've got that company turnover, and you would also think that maybe some culture at the studio has been changing rapidly as every co-founder has left the studio as well. That's always a very important thing as far as the dynamic of how a studio operates, is the culture, the feedback loop, and that feeds into the actual games that they end up shipping. So now it's sort of I would think a make or break it for Media Molecule with this next game that they eventually end up shipping. There are still a lot of very talented creative people there. I just am so curious to see what that next game does look like, and that's going to be very reflective on what is a new Media Molecule led by new people. Moving on to a very interesting update for the Sony sues Tencent over Light of Motiram debacle, and that is the game on Steam has recently been updated, and sure enough, they are changing it a lot to try and distance themselves away from the Horizon IP, which you can see they changed out all the screenshots, they changed the key art, and they redid the description as well. So they're trying to make it, further away from Horizon, which might be hard to do considering the game looks so much like Horizon, and the underlying context of how this game was even made is that in all likelihood, it was being made and pitched as a Horizon game, and then they had to pivot by throwing in new characters, changing the name, and, that's kind of all they did, really. A lot of it still looks like Horizon. And Sony is still committed to making sure the game just does not come out at all. That is what they're pursuing from that lawsuit. So I'm not sure this is going to be enough. In fact, I would think this most certainly is not going to be enough. But you can see their initial attempt to be compliant and try and get the game out. We'll keep following this, see how it develops. But this might be a Band-Aid fix that is not going to cut it. All right, let's move on to Sony's Q1 fiscal year 2025 financial report, which runs from the beginning of April to the end of June. And we have some pretty impressive numbers here from the Games and Network Services segment where, big surprise, PlayStation 5 is still doing very well. So Sony shipped 2.5 million PlayStation 5 consoles, slightly up from 2.4 million year over year, for a worldwide total of 80.3 million. So around 2 million consoles behind PS4 on a launch-aligned basis. The digital software ratio hit a new peak, reaching 83%. That's up from 80% year over year. And monthly active users were 123 million. That was also up from 116 million year over year. And sales were up 8% due to non-first-party games, add-on content, and sales from network services. Operation income saw a 127% increase for the same things, so $1 billion something here, just over. They made a ton of money. I guess a lot of this was also closing up the debt from the Bungie acquisition. That's all said and done, but that was absolutely huge. And then the fiscal year 2025 forecast for sales is flat. So they're not changing that at all, but operating income has been revised with 4% upward. And the only one negative there being an impact of a delay in the launch timing of a first-party game. And that is probably Marathon. With all certainty, it is Marathon, which we'll talk about later in a second here. But as for tariff impacts, the Game and Network Services division has a slight upward revision of 20 billion yen for sales and operating income, and Sony expects there to be a decrease of 30 billion yen for fiscal year 2025 overall, based on the new rates announced August 1st. They also claim they've nearly completed diversifying the production locations of their main products by the end of the quarter and should complete all of that by the first half of this fiscal year, which the CFO Lin Tao got into that a little bit during the Q&A portion with the publications and investors. So what we know there is that consoles, they've pretty much got that sourced out. So the consoles coming to the US now are not from China. They've got other production facilities that they're working out of. So that's how they've sort of got that allocated there. Accessories is what they're wrapping up next. So that's something that they're going to want to try and clear up by the first half of this fiscal year. They're still also not really saying a whole lot as far as possible price increases or not. So a good portion of all the questions between the media and investors definitely was about the tariffs, and Sony was very careful to not say much else beyond the numbers that they proposed here. So they're not willing to let people know if they're considering that price increase for their products or not, just that we're monitoring the situation very closely and this is what's going on. So they're not even so much as saying anything with the proposed 100% semiconductor tariff as well, which obviously there's no production facility here in the US for them to lean on that. So there's just not really a whole lot to go on with that. Other than that, though, the numbers are obviously good. The thing that's interesting actually is that PS5 saw a slight increase year over year for Q1 sales, since typically there's that decay curve, so you don't see that go up. And the more surprising thing is that happened before we got Grand Theft Auto 6, because that's the one thing we're all sort of waiting for, is the impact that game will have on consoles. And in this context, it's really just PlayStation 5 now. Xbox hardware sales keep declining year over year at a very rapid amount, double digits basically for the percentage there. So with PS5, they've got this clear landing strip, as I like to say. So you would think that that will be an atypical curve and it will go back up by maybe a substantial amount. We don't know, but they've made a ton of money this quarter, or the outgoing quarter rather. They're still doing well. There's not really much else to be said outside of just that. Now, getting into other parts of the Q1 report, we also have Sony's updated figures on live service and also some new comments on their live service rollout, which has been turbulent, obviously, but the thing we can mention right off the bat is that Sony gave a very interesting new metric for the 3 ongoing live service games they have right now, that being MLB The Show, Destiny 2, and Helldivers 2. These 3 games alone accounted for 40% of the first-party revenue during the quarter. So those 3 games already making a ton of money for Sony, coming out to that almost half bottom line that we've seen from, if you remember the slides during the business segment briefing, where the past 3 years now, you've seen that for the entire games business and for all of SIE, half of that revenue does come from the black hole games, and now that's starting to extend into the first-party software lineup as well. Which Lin Tao did clarify that 40% is for this quarter. For the entire year, it's like closer to 20-30%, somewhere around there. So it's not quite, half, obviously, and it's really dependent on the quarter and performance and other AAA single-player games coming out at that time, but it just lets you know exactly where the company stands with their commitment. Now, during the investor Q&A portion, the CFO, again Lin Tao, did respond to a question about Marathon, saying they do expect it to launch this fiscal year, so before April 2026. But she also said that's not a commitment, just that they're still looking to evaluate the game and they do intend on releasing it before April 2026. This investor also asked about the governance of Bungie, and Lin did say that they initially offered independence or an independence approach with Bungie, and we all know that's how that acquisition played out. But with the restructuring announced last year, she does confirm that Bungie is slowly transitioning into PlayStation Studios. So as we initially saw from the acquisition, they're independent. There is that stipulation of a few SI folks getting on the Bungie board, and there were certain milestones and metrics they had to reach to retain their independence. They were starting to lose that. They lost it. Back-end office operations were being incorporated into SIE. That was the language we had prior. And now she's outright saying, yes, they are going to be put under PlayStation Studios proper. So I guess that's still a somewhat long-term thing. They're trying to slowly integrate Bungie into PS Studios. Now, the following investor also asked about the live service issues, which Lin gave a very candid answer here, saying that things have not been going smoothly, even referencing things like the Marathon delay and Concord from last year. So they are saying that these lessons, they're trying to learn from them, learn from their mistakes, and making sure they introduce live service games where there's less waste and it's more smooth. That's the language they were using. That might also just be chalked up to translation as far as, how it sounds sounds a little bit weird there. But otherwise, yeah, I mean, there's nothing really all that surprising here. I guess it's just what's really noteworthy is that 40% metric off of just 3 games alone. And that will also really sort of, to circle back to the Helldivers 2 Xbox port, that will show why Sony is motivated in certain cases to ship a game over to Xbox, where, sure, maybe it's not a huge player base, but, you know, if the game makes sense for that kind of environment, you can see that they're going to be motivated to get the game over there and see an additional, 10, 15 something % revenue on top of what they're already making for Helldivers 2, if you consider, again, the Xbox install base. There's still a lot of synergy there, and so it's not at all surprising when MLB, for example, they had their hands tied behind their back with the MLB Association, but they have that telemetry now, right? Taking over Bungie, seeing Destiny 2 numbers, Helldivers 2. It's just, there's nothing about this that should really be alarming or concerning, at least in the sense of, why Sony is as committed as they are to really pursuing live service and having some big hitters. Now, the other big headline out of this report is how Sony is shifting away from a hardware-focused business into more creation and entertainment, which that does also pertain to gaming, but there is some very clear context we need to provide. So what happened here was Sony's SVP, Sadahiko Hayakawa, responded to a question from the press about how Sony's recently announced partnership with Bandai Namco is about fan IP and expansions. So his response here is pretty long, but to paraphrase this a little bit, he talks about how 60% of their consolidated revenue is from entertainment and creation. So he said, and I quote here, "In gaming business and moving away from a hardware-centric business to more to the community-based engagement business, and then that has been increasing. So now as we make more transition to entertainment creation, the stability and productivity, our performance is increasing. So this upward revision might not have been a direct result of these. However, the music publishing and also acquisition of a music catalog and also the acquisition of Crunchyroll, these are the areas where we are seeing growth. And as a portfolio, we have been expanding our business and also improving our profitability." Now, you might hear that and think, what on God's green earth is this man trying to say? Which is fair. I mean, that's actually a translation. So that's like, if you're sitting there watching the Q&A, it's kind of really weirdly piecemealed out as far as like when they're speaking, and then the translator comes in and they're trying to piece together what is being said, and that might come out in a very weird sounding way, but that's why I wanted to at least give that quick little paraphrase, which the important thing to understand out of all that is 60% of their consolidated revenue is entertainment, which is different from how Sony has historically operated. Sony was a technology giant, and that was a hardware-focused business. TVs, phones, laptops, PlayStation as a console, which that's not going away. I mean, Sony's making 2 SoCs right now, which is a portable and PlayStation 6. Consoles are not going to be something they'll walk away from. It is the foundation of how they primarily make money with the games and network services segment, and that's why PS5 makes so much money as it does. It's the foundation, yes, but at the end of the day, they're selling a PS5 so that PS5 user is constantly on PlayStation 5. They track engagement very closely. They want to expand the IP to sell these things outside of PlayStation consoles. Obviously, that much is clear. But when you're spending all your time on PS5, you're spending your money on there as well. So that's subscription, that's MTX, that's all the add-ons on the PlayStation Store. That's why PS5 is the most profitable generation to date. And so that's not them saying that we are slowly walking away from PlayStation as a console. In fact, I still stand by us probably having consoles for a very long time. They'll be relevant for much longer than I think people tend to think it will be. And as of right now, PlayStation 6, I think they're still in a very, very strong position. Moving on to some third-party news stories, beginning with this one from Push Square, where they just simply pointed this out, and I thought it was quite noteworthy that one of the games from the Nintendo Direct, which got a release date confirmation and also a Switch 2 version, Bloober Team's Cronos: The New Dawn, the new survival horror game, Skybound Games is going to be doing the publishing for the physical version, and right now, as the situation stands, Xbox is not getting a Blu-ray, Switch 2 getting a keycard, and then PS5 is a Blu-ray on disc. we presume all on disc, and that is likely a situation we will see more and more common as we get further into the Switch 2 lifecycle, and certain games are skipping a Switch 1 release, which has those vendor options for a smaller game card where they can put the whole game on the game card. So we might be only a year or two away from most third-party games getting a full physical print only on PlayStation 5 and nothing else, which is crazy. I didn't think that is where we would be this soon, if only because Switch 2 was poised to be another very physical platform, and it is. It's just that, Keycards has put a lot of publishers in a very tough position of it's not worth spending upwards of $20-something for the game card. It's actually straight up unsustainable to pay for that card. Some games, it absolutely would not make any sense, and I actually don't blame publishers for having to opt for the game card when you have something like, Pac-Man 2 Repack, the Repack World. That's retails for $30. There's no way they can do a full 64-gigabyte card. So it's just kind of insane that that's where we are right now. I didn't think PS5 would be the last remaining very physical platform that offers full game builds on the disc. Which caveat, yes, that always depends on the publisher, making sure that they actually ship a full Gold Master on the disc in time, but I think you know my point because I'm not going to repeat the same thing over and over again every time this does come up. I would hope most people know by now, there's a lot of good, solid Gold Masters on PS5 discs as of today. However, what will that look like going into PlayStation 6? I think that is still completely unknown. I believe it will have discs. It's more a matter of how compliant will Sony be with that disc support. Is it going to be standard? Will it be another add-on drive with an internet connection that you have to register one time? Will it only play 5 and 4 discs and there's no PS6 printed media? There's still a lot of unknowns there, but I do think PS6 in just 2 years will offer it. It just matters, or it remains to be seen what it will look like. Next up, the long-in-development China Hero game Lost Soul Aside, which is coming out August 29th, just went gold. So no more delays. This game is coming out on time on PlayStation 5 and PC, and I am so curious to see where the reviews will fall on this game. It looks good. There's definitely some concerns. There's been some hands-on where people are not fully sold on the game just yet, depending on price point and things like that, but it's still something we've been watching for a very long time, so I'm curious to see how this game is going to land critically. Moving on to Capcom's Pragmata, we actually got some semi-new gameplay for this as well. It was the same demo shown off during Summer Game Fest, I believe, but now we've got a lot more footage to see ourselves and actually see that gameplay in action of how it really works, because it's very unconventional with the combat. So you can see that it is a third-person shooter, sure, but you have to have that little girl, Diane, jump up on the protagonist's back, and then you're solving puzzles mid-combat, many very simplistic puzzles that will then expose the enemy weakness, and that's how you then are able to resolve your combat and kill out the enemies over time, which it seems like it's much more, I don't want to say slow, but slower in the sense that it might not be that manageable to take on more than a handful of enemies at a time. I don't know, I think there's a lot of unknowns as far as the gameplay loop, and it looks interesting. I'm not sure if it feels and plays that well, but it's cool to see it in action, and these are the kind of things where I think they stand out a lot. Pragmata already kind of stood out, just in that, it was announced next to PlayStation 5 with the console reveal, and there was those parallels with Deep Down simply because we had so many years go by where there was no updates and everyone's wondering, is the game going to come out? And it looked pretty, high quality as far as AAA stuff goes. So there were already a lot of eyes on this game, but I think it's so cool that they are going for a very different approach in the gameplay department. So you can definitely look up some Pragmata gameplay, and it does look different. You can say that for sure. Next up, we just missed this one from LTPS last week, but Starfield on PlayStation 5. Not coming out this year, apparently, but it might be coming sometime soon next year. So this was reported by MP First, which, according to their sources, Starfield is not going to come out to PS5 this year, but instead spring 2026. And that's partly due to weak sales of the first expansion, so they're trying to coincide the second expansion and quality of life updates with a PS5 release. So if you were looking forward to Starfield on PlayStation 5, I think it's all but certain at this point, right? It's not even going to be remotely surprising when it does get confirmed, more a matter of when. And it would be timely, I think, and this might be more down to personal preference, but I know I'm not alone in this, which is waiting for the game to come out next to a pretty big expansion. So as you're playing it, it feels like you've got all the most up-to-date recent content as well, which there's likely going to be even more content beyond that. but it's better to have as much as you possibly can have by the time you're ready to play the game for yourself. So PS5 owners might not have to wait that long. It feels like this year is actually going by very fast. Now, we do have some bad news for the Bioshock sequel and also the apparent Bioshock remake that we only just now found out about, and it's canceled. So, reported by Jason Schreier, writing for Bloomberg, the Bioshock sequel in development at Cloud Chamber is allegedly in trouble. So, according to sources, the narrative is one big issue that they're going to completely revamp, and that's going to set the game back even more from what's already been a 10-something year possible dev cycle. That's what we're hearing. It's been, in the oven for quite a long time now at this point. Not fully at Cloud Chamber, just it's been revamped and rebooted a handful of times as far as the plot and also the geographic location. And we heard that the remake of the original game was indeed in development, but that was canceled earlier this year. Now, shortly after this report, IGN did get to speak with Take-Two CEO Strauss Zelnick ahead of their fiscal report, and they did ask if the game was in danger of being canceled. And Zelnick said, quote, "It's going to come out, that I can say hand on heart without question." So that is a very firm, direct answer. Hey, it's coming. I guarantee it, which that doesn't really mean anything, obviously. But I guess what we could say is there is some confidence that we want to make sure that thing does eventually get shipped, which, here's the thing, right? I love Bioshock a lot, and I'm cautiously optimistic for a Bioshock 4. And by proxy, also Judas, whenever Ken Levine and his team get that game out, because that too has been going through some development nightmares. But having said that, I want both games. I'm so upset at this remake that was indeed a real thing, and that's canceled. That just seemed like such a slam dunk to me. And I say slam dunk with the obvious understanding of you can mess up a remake, it can go wrong, but you do have a very basic idea of what needs to be done. And if we're talking about, 7th gen games from the PS3 and 360 era that are going to get a remake or something, and I mean a full-blown remake. I don't need a resolution and frame rate bump. We got that on PS4. I want a full-blown, selfish, like Last of Us Part 1 style remake or the Dead Space remake. I want just super solid updated textures and this game to be finely crafted for a modern audience. It's still one of my top 5 games of all time. I love Bioshock so much, and I wish I could forget it just so I could experience it again for the very first time. So I would love to see that game get remade. Maybe that will happen down the road or something. I don't know. They have to find a competent studio that they can commission to get that done, because I think, here's the thing, right? If they canceled it, it's probably because it was not shaping up that well. So that's actually good news, I guess we could say. If there's a silver lining here, it's just that, God, find a good, competent studio and get it done, because I think Bioshock, especially, 12, 13 years onward now at this point, there's been a generational turnover. The game holds up very well. There's still not many games that are like it. It should be exposed to a new audience. Moving on to Silent Hill F, where recently the press had some hands-on time with this game. They played about 5 hours in Tokyo as part of a press event, which that is like a third of the game basically, so they've got a very good idea of how it's shaping up so far, and it does look very good. So we've got a load of new details, which, as a basic recap, the story at least is based on the protagonist, Hinako. She runs away from home after being scolded by her abusive father in the 1960s Japanese town Ebisuka, and there she meets up with her friends and things go south, and so you have to try and get out of town basically. But the gameplay, so there's still plenty of puzzles. So far they've been described as simple, not overly obtuse, and there's some clear hints and direction on how to solve them. But combat is a bit different. It's all melee, no guns, and there is going to be weapon durability, which that's been described as not being as annoying to deal with as it is in the moment, because there are certain combat scenarios where you can get easily overwhelmed, and so it's easier to just drop your weapon, run away, and you can probably find another one versus trying to repair it. You can also save resources for the save points, which will allow you to upgrade your stats or buy certain buffs, and there is also counterattacks and dodging. There's a much more methodical approach to each encounter, and that sounds interesting, but we also know that players will have one specific ending for their first run, and then after that, the game is going to have 5 endings, and then the New Game Plus mode is going to alter and change those as well. So in standard Silent Hill fashion, you are going to have those other endings that you can explore, but it's cool that for your first time, everybody is going to experience the same one. So adding a lot of replayability to that, which a lot of horror games, they do tend to have that replayability factor to it. But can I just say, the gameplay itself, or rather, well, not even the gameplay, the art direction, the style, the way the game's presented, it looks so compelling. The vibe itself is just, I think, what is really going to sell this game above maybe other horror games in recent years. I think there's just very few games that look quite like this, where it's so authentic to the 1960s rural Japanese town. It's just the aesthetic is so haunting. And they really are trying to punch home that idea of it's not necessarily the big scares that will scare you. It is just the uneasiness as you're exploring Japanese homes or the alleyways as things start to get just a little bit more dark and twisted. This game, it's checking off every box for me. Oh my god, it looks so good. Next up, Genshin Impact on PlayStation 4 is being discontinued. So this was confirmed by Hoyoverse, where they do say the PS4 version is going to be delisted very soon, September 9th, and then February 24th, 2026, they'll turn off in-game purchases, and then April 7th, support for the game will end and players will not be able to log in, which Hoyoverse says it's due to limitations in hardware performance and the application size, which might be true, but they also have this game running on smartphones, which smartphones are very capable, yes, but you would think they could still probably work within the PS4 limit for, I would think, a reasonable amount of time. I think it's actually kind of noteworthy for this particular game with how big it is that the PS4 audience maybe is just not commanding that kind of resources that Hoyoverse would have to put into the game to maintain it for however many years they were maybe planning to maintain it. I don't know. It's just, I saw this story and I thought, oh, okay, well, that's kind of interesting. But then I also thought, well, wait a minute, PS4 going into its legacy years, this is going to be a little bit more detrimental than what PlayStation 3 went through, because a lot of the PS4 legacy games at this point are live service titles. And so when support for those games end, there is no path to continue playing those on PlayStation 4. They're often delisted. There is no way to get a new license. You might have to wait a very long time for some kind of client and build to show up with people that are able to properly archive a certain version of the game, perhaps the last version, the last patch that went out, and reverse engineer it that way. There might be a lot of hurdles compared to the arena-style games that PlayStation 3 had back in its day, because that's something we always check in on with PS3 is those legacy games for PS3 Online, and so many of those games just need a handful of packet captures, and that's basically it to get those games up and online again. Not to say it's easy for those communities to do that, but when you have all those games sold at retail and you can still pull the latest version from PSN, it's not the same hurdle as what PS4 might see for all these live service games that are now having the support cut off, but these games are also being completely removed, and it's not that easy to get a license and restore the purchase on your console, right? So, I saw this and I thought, man, it feels pretty soon for Genshin Impact, if I'm being honest. I think it's always easy to look at PS4 and want the studios to move away from these systems, but you do have to think about the long-term legacy support that a lot of players will want out of that system, especially for these consoles being in developing countries, and there might not be a whole lot left there to play when some of these games are completely delisted. Now, with all that said, it is time for Let's Talk Plus, the weekly Let's Talk PlayStation giveaway, where one of you can win a $10 PSN code. I would like to congratulate this viewer right here. I'll be contacting you very soon via email or X, and if you would like to win a $10 PSN code, it is so simple. Follow the link down below or scan the QR code, enter the Gleam giveaway, and supporting this channel, a number of ways can gain you an entry, and I'll announce the winner next week, because I'm trying to help pay for your games. Those are all the stories from this past week that I wanted to talk about with you all. And if you did not see, on Saturday after LTPS, we had a very big PlayStation 6 and PS6 portable rumor that we covered. So that's why that was not in this LTPS. That is a separate upload. Very important next-gen news. A lot of stuff going on there. Our Tuesday upload was looking at a very old build of PlayStation Home, the GDC closed beta from 2007. It was a trip walking through that, so that was our Tuesday video. And we also did Click R3 live on Tuesday as well. Me and John are probably going to be doing Click R3 live from now on. We won't have a set schedule, but typically we're still doing every 2 weeks, and that will be bounced around of a Tuesday or Wednesday night. It's just sort of a, when we can do it kind of thing, obviously, but when we do it, seems like we might be doing it live now, so it'd be fun for some to come out and chit-chat with us, and we can engage with the chat for a little bit as well. So, but that is also up on the Spawncast Network channel, so you can check that out. And I think that's about it. That's all we have for housekeeping. So that concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Benecki. Thank you all so much for talking with me, and I will see you all next Friday.